Officers Hale and his team ruled the streets with unchecked power, their badges shields against consequence. Raymond Carter knew their type. Cops who saw black men as easy targets, who used their authority to harass, brutalize, and bury the truth beneath falsified reports and lost evidence. He had watched it happen too many times, seen neighbors pulled over for nothing, friends humiliated on the sidewalk, families torn apart by a system designed to protect its own. But Raymond wasn't just another man to be silenced. He was a former Marine, trained to endure, to fight, to survive. And he wasn't going to wait for the next victim. He was going to expose them. He was going to make sure the world saw the truth. Setting the trap was dangerous, but necessary. A hidden camera, a staged encounter, undeniable proof. He would give them the opportunity to do what they had always done. And when they did, there would be no way to spin it, no way to bury it. This time, justice wouldn't just be demanded, it would be inevitable. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe. Raymond Carter walked slowly along the cracked sidewalk, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets as a chill breeze swept through the neighborhood. He had called this place home for nearly 15 years, longer than anywhere else in his life. It wasn't perfect. His street had its fair share of boarded-up windows, and the little corner store he used to frequent had closed months ago. But it was still home. To him, at least. To others, it seemed like a problem to be solved. The signs were subtle at first. Police cruisers started lingering a little too long on certain blocks, slowing down as kids played outside or as an elderly couple sat on their stoop. Then the questions began. What are you doing here? Where are you headed? Questions asked in sharp, clipped tones, as if just existing in this space was a crime. Raymond had brushed off the first few incidents. He was a former Marine. He'd been through worse. But it didn't stop. It only grew worse. A few months ago, they'd pulled over his neighbor, an older man who ran a small cleaning business. They called it a routine stop, but everyone knew what it was. A black man in a van full of cleaning supplies must have looked suspicious. The man's granddaughter had filmed the whole thing from her phone. It circulated online for a while, people were outraged, but then the attention died down. Nothing changed. That was what finally got under Raymond's skin. The helpless feeling of watching his neighbors, his friends, his community endure the same harassment day after day, with no real recourse. He'd been trained to defend people, to protect the vulnerable. And here he was, just letting it happen. He first heard about Lisa Tanner from a friend who had once tipped her off about a predatory landlord in another part of the city. She's one of the good ones, his friend had said. Doesn't twist your words. Doesn't stop until she finds the truth. Raymond had been skeptical. Reporters weren't exactly on his list of trusted people, especially the ones who swooped into neighborhoods like his, hunting for stories. But when Lisa contacted him, she didn't sound like someone hunting for a scoop. She sounded curious, serious. She showed up at the community center where Raymond was fixing a leaky pipe. A petite woman with sharp features and even sharper eyes, she introduced herself and got straight to the point. I've been hearing about what's happening around here. I think there's a bigger story. Raymond eyed her suspiciously. A bigger story, huh? And what are you going to do with it? Write an article that gets buried in the back pages. I'll do more than write an article, Lisa said firmly. I'll make sure people can't look away. I don't just want to talk about what's going on here. I want to show it. He didn't say yes right away. Over the next week, Lisa kept showing up. She talked to other residents, asked questions, listened more than she spoke. Each time, she came back to Raymond. You're the one who can help me make this happen, she'd tell him. People respect you. They'll see what's really happening if you're the one showing them. Raymond had shaken his head the first few times. I don't need that kind of attention, he'd say. What if it makes things worse? Lisa's response was always the same. What if it makes them better? It wasn't like Raymond to trust reporters, but Lisa's persistence made an impression. She wasn't just passing through. She seemed determined to stay until something changed. By the end of their last conversation, Raymond found himself agreeing. if only because someone had to do it. It was her idea to go undercover. People need to see it, she'd said. Not just hear it, not just read about it. They need to see it happen. Raymond adjusted his jacket and set off down the block. This was it. No turning back. He didn't know what was going to happen, but he knew he couldn't stay silent anymore. Raymond strode toward the upscale neighborhood, each step measured and deliberate. It was a short walk, but the change in scenery came quickly. The boarded-up windows and cracked sidewalks gave way to neatly trimmed hedges and driveways with luxury cars parked in them. He passed a family unloading groceries, their SUV gleaming in the late afternoon sunlight. The mother glanced his way, her smile faltering slightly as her eyes lingered on him. He knew the look well. It wasn't open hostility, but it wasn't warm either. It was that cautious, assessing gaze that hinted at suspicion. He kept moving, forcing himself not to react. This wasn't new. He was here to show the world what happened next. A few blocks in, the neighborhood grew quieter. The only sounds were the faint hum of a lawnmower and the rhythmic swish of sprinklers. Raymond adjusted his jacket slightly, feeling the hidden camera pressing against his chest. He could hear Lisa's voice in his head, reminding him to stay calm and natural. "Afternoon," a middle-aged man said, stepping out onto his porch with a newspaper tucked under his arm. The man's smile was friendly enough, but his gaze lingered a moment too long. Raymond nodded. "Afternoon?" The man tilted his head, his smile wavering. "You live around here?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual, but not quite succeeding. "No," Raymond said simply, "just walking through." The man's smile disappeared completely, replaced by a tight, polite nod. "Enjoy your walk," he said, his tone cooler now. Raymond kept moving, his footsteps deliberate but relaxed. Inside, though, his thoughts churned. He didn't have to look back to know the man on the porch was still watching him. Further down the block, a police cruiser idled at a stop sign. Raymond's stomach tightened as he passed, but he made himself look straight ahead. The officers inside didn't move at first, but the longer he stayed on the same street, the more obvious it became. They were watching him, too. At the next corner, the cruiser slowly rolled forward. It wasn't fast enough to catch up, but it wasn't idle anymore. Raymond's mind churned. Was this it? Was it starting already? When he reached the next block, he noticed a second cruiser parked on the side of the road. Two officers leaned against it, talking casually. But their eyes followed him as he approached. One of them said something to the other, and both began to move toward him. Raymond's pulse quickened. He glanced around. Nothing but quiet homes and manicured lawns. He focused on his breathing, just as he'd learned in the Marines. "Stay calm. Stay steady." "Excuse me, sir," one of the officers called out. "Can we have a word?" Raymond stopped, standing tall. "Sure," he said. "What can I do for you?" The officer, a broad man with a square jaw, stepped closer. "We got a call about someone matching your description. Said you were acting suspicious." Raymond raised an eyebrow. "Suspicious? How?" The officer crossed his arms. "Just wandering around." "Not from around here, are you?" "I'm just taking a walk," Raymond replied evenly. The second officer, taller and thinner, joined the conversation. "Well, we're going to need some ID. Just routine." Raymond hesitated. "Am I being detained?" "Not yet," the first officer said, a smirk tugging at his lips. Raymond kept his voice steady. "If I'm not being detained, I'd like to be on my way." The officers exchanged a glance. The first one's smile vanished. "Not so fast. We have some questions." Raymond clenched his jaw. This was the moment he'd prepared for. The moment Lisa had warned him about. The moment that would be caught on camera. "You don't see many guys like you around here," the taller officer said, his eyes narrowing. "Big guy like you walking through a neighborhood like this stands out, don't you think?" Raymond's voice was calm but firm. "I'm just walking." The shorter officer stepped closer, his smirk returning. "Walking? You mean waddling? Maybe you're just out for a stroll, but most people don't call that exercise." The officers chuckled, the taller one shaking his head. "You sure you're not just out here casing the place? Big guy like you must be looking for an easy target, right?" Raymond's jaw tightened, but he didn't move. "I'm just walking," he repeated. "Well," the shorter officer said, his smirk now a sneer, "maybe you should walk a little faster before things get complicated." Raymond didn't flinch. He didn't let his anger show. He knew the camera was rolling, knew Lisa would be watching this later. "I'm not doing anything wrong," he said. The taller officer took another step closer, now towering over him. "No, you're not," he said slowly, "but you sure don't look like you belong here." "Looks can be deceiving," Raymond said. His voice was still calm, but there was an edge to it now. "And I'm not moving." The officers stared at him for a long moment, the tension heavy in the air. The tension crackled like static electricity. The officers stood closer than necessary, their body language shifting from casual curiosity to subtle aggression. Raymond had seen this kind of posturing before. Chest puffed out, arms crossed, the barely restrained urge to assert dominance. He stayed still, his feet planted firmly on the sidewalk, his hands at his sides. Calm, controlled. He knew the camera was catching all of it. "So, you're refusing to cooperate?" the shorter officer said, his smirk curling into something more menacing. "I never said that," Raymond replied. His voice was steady, even measured. "I told you, I'm just out for a walk." The taller officer raised an eyebrow, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just out for a walk, huh? Dressed like that?" "Dressed like what?" Raymond asked. "What's wrong with what I'm wearing?" "Nothing," the shorter officer said, his grin reappearing. "Just looks a little out of place, like you're not from around here." "I already told you," Raymond said, holding his ground. "I'm just walking through." "Well, maybe you should walk yourself back where you came from," the taller officer snapped. "You think these people want to see you standing around here?" Raymond didn't flinch. "I have every right to be here," he said calmly. "I'm not breaking any laws." "Your attitude is what's suspicious," the shorter officer shot back. "Guy like you, big and heavy, just wandering through, looking at these houses like they're free for the taking?" Raymond's jaw tightened. He'd had enough. "I haven't done anything wrong," he said firmly. "You stopped me. I'm just walking," the taller officer sneered. "Listen, buddy, I don't know what you think you're doing here, but I don't trust it. You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood, and you sure as hell don't act like you do." "What's that supposed to mean?" Raymond asked, his voice still calm, though his patience was wearing thin. "It means," the shorter officer said, stepping closer, "that maybe we need to have a little chat down at the station. You know, just to be sure." "That sounds an awful lot like you're detaining me," Raymond said, meeting the officer's eyes. "And if that's the case, I'd like to know what law I've broken." "You've got a smart mouth," the taller officer muttered. He leaned in closer, his eyes narrowing. "Maybe you're not breaking any laws, but you're pissing me off, and that's enough to make you a problem." Raymond kept his expression neutral. "Last I checked, that's not a crime." The shorter officer laughed, though it sounded forced. "You think you're clever, don't you? Big, tough guy with all the answers. Let's see how clever you are when we bring you in." "Bring me in for what?" Raymond asked. His voice remained calm, but the edge was sharper now. "I told you what I'm doing. I'm walking through this neighborhood. That's not a crime." "It is when you're casing houses," the taller officer shot back. His tone wasn't sarcastic anymore. It was firm, deliberate, and dangerous. "Casing houses?" Raymond asked, a slight rise in his voice. "That's ridiculous. I'm just walking." "We've got reports," the shorter officer said, his grin gone now. "A big guy, black, matching your description, going door to door trying to look for easy targets." Raymond narrowed his eyes. "You're lying. You never got a call." The taller officer stepped forward, his hand resting on his belt. "Are you calling us liars, sir?" "I'm calling it what it is," Raymond replied. "An excuse." "Excuses don't land people in cuffs," the shorter officer said. "But keep this up, and we'll see if we need to get you down to the station for some questioning." Raymond's pulse quickened, but he held his ground. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm not casing houses. I'm not robbing anyone, and you know that." "Is that so?" the taller officer said, a sneer curling at the edge of his mouth. Because, from where I'm standing, it sure looks like you've been hanging around a little too long, and it sure looks like you're looking for something more than just a walk." Raymond took a slow breath, steadying himself. The camera was still rolling, capturing every word, every sneer, every accusation, but he could feel the temperature rising, the air thick with tension. "I'm not robbing anyone," Raymond said again, his voice clear and firm. "And if you're going to accuse me of that, you'd better be ready to back it up with more than just your assumptions." The officers exchanged a glance. Their confidence didn't falter, but the lines in their faces hardened. Their postures stiffened. They weren't letting him go. The officers' expressions darkened, the sneers turning into something colder. Raymond could feel the weight of their stares, the way they stood too close, their hands inching toward their belts. He didn't move. He couldn't afford to. He knew how quickly situations like this could spiral out of control. "You don't seem to understand," the shorter officer said, his voice low and menacing. "You're not just going to walk away from this." Raymond's jaw tightened. "I'm not going anywhere until you tell me exactly what I've done wrong." The taller officer stepped even closer, towering over him. "You've got a smart mouth, don't you? Maybe you're used to talking back to people, but out here, that's not going to fly." "I'm not talking back," Raymond said, his voice steady. "I'm just asking for some clarity." "Clarity?" The shorter officer barked a laugh. "You're in the wrong neighborhood, big man. Clarity's not going to help you here." Raymond stood his ground. "I'm not going to let you intimidate me." That was when it happened. The taller officer's hand shot out, shoving Raymond hard in the chest. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't a light push. It was a full-force attempt to knock him off balance. Raymond staggered back, but didn't fall. His training kicked in, instinctively steadying his stance. "Hey!" Raymond barked, his voice sharper now. "What's your problem?" "My problem is you," the taller officer snapped, stepping forward again. "You think you can just stand here and run your mouth like you're untouchable?" Raymond raised his hands, palms open. "I'm not looking for trouble. I'm just standing here." The shorter officer smirked. "Maybe you should have thought of that before you mouthed off." "Mouthed off?" Raymond repeated, his voice rising. "I'm just asking you why you're stopping me. I'm not threatening anyone. You put hands on me. You're lucky that's all we did." The taller officer snarled, closing the distance again. "Guys like you think you can do whatever you want. Not in this neighborhood." Raymond's heart pounded, but he kept his voice firm. "I don't have to explain myself to you. I'm not doing anything illegal. You've got no reason to be in my face." The words barely left his mouth when the shorter officer reached out, grabbing at his arm. Raymond yanked it back, but the movement escalated the tension in an instant. The taller officer seized the opportunity, reaching for Raymond's jacket collar. They weren't just questioning him now. They were making it physical. "Don't touch me!" Raymond snapped, his voice loud enough to carry. He wasn't shouting, but the command in his tone was impossible to ignore. "Or what?" The shorter officer sneered, his grip tightening. "Or I'll defend myself," Raymond warned. He wasn't bluffing. He knew he couldn't afford to make the first move, but he also knew he wasn't going to let himself be manhandled. The taller officer shoved him again, harder this time. Raymond stumbled back, his shoulder brushing against a nearby lamppost. It was clear now. They wanted a reaction. They wanted him to fight back so they could claim he was the aggressor. But Raymond wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. "I'm warning you," Raymond said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through him. "Let go of me." The shorter officer pulled back for a moment, just long enough to exchange a glance with his partner. Then, without another word, he swung. The punch caught Raymond off guard, glancing off his jaw but not knocking him down. The pain was sharp, sudden, but it also flipped a switch in his mind. He didn't have a choice anymore. They'd started it, and now he had to defend himself. Raymond ducked as the taller officer swung next, the punch missing him by inches. He planted his feet and shoved back, using his size and strength to create space. The officers didn't stop. The shorter one lunged again, and this time Raymond caught his arm and twisted it just enough to make him yelp and let go. "Enough!" Raymond shouted. "I don't want to fight you." The taller officer stepped in again, his face twisted in anger. "Yeah, well, you got one anyway." The fight moved into the street. Raymond kept his movements tight, controlled, not throwing wild punches, but using calculated blocks and counters to keep the officers from overwhelming him. It wasn't a brawl. It was tactical, almost surgical. His military training had taught him how to neutralize threats quickly, but he was holding back. He didn't want to hurt them, even though they clearly had no such hesitation. The taller officer threw another punch, this time connecting with Raymond's shoulder. He staggered, but didn't fall. Instead, he used the momentum to step to the side and deliver a quick, open-handed strike to the officer's forearm, forcing him to drop back. The shorter officer tried to grab him from behind, but Raymond spun, breaking the hold and shoving him away. They kept coming. Every time Raymond deflected one, the other would attack. His breathing was heavy now, each move deliberate but tiring. He wasn't going to go down easily, though. He wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Raymond's breath came fast and heavy. His muscles tensed as he moved with precision, blocking one officer while bracing for the other. He wasn't trying to win this fight. He was trying to survive it. He had been trained for combat, but this wasn't war. He was fighting two men who had the power to make him the villain, no matter how much he tried to hold back. The taller officer lunged at him again, fists swinging wildly. Raymond ducked, weaving just in time to avoid a direct hit to the face. Instead, the officer's knuckles scraped across his temple, sending a sharp sting through his skull. He clenched his jaw, his instincts screaming at him to strike back. "Stop this!" Raymond bellowed, stepping back, hands raised in a defensive posture. "I don't want to fight!" The shorter officer spat at the ground, his chest heaving. "You don't get to decide that, fat boy." Raymond's blood ran hot, but he swallowed the insult, forcing himself to stay composed. He backed up another step, trying to put more distance between them. If he could just keep them from closing in. Maybe. The taller officer didn't give him a chance to finish the thought. He rushed forward again, this time slamming his shoulder into Raymond's chest, knocking him backward onto the pavement. Pain exploded through Raymond's back as he hit the ground hard, the rough asphalt scraping against his skin beneath his clothes. Before he could get up, a boot came down on his arm, pinning him. "Got you now, big guy," the shorter officer sneered, pressing his weight onto Raymond's forearm. Raymond gritted his teeth, feeling the strain in his arm as the pressure increased. The taller officer crouched down, his face inches from Raymond's. "You think you're tough, huh?" he hissed. "Think you can just walk through here like you belong?" Raymond tried to yank his arm free, but the officer twisted his foot, grinding it into his muscle. He bit back a groan, refusing to give them the satisfaction of hearing him in pain. "I didn't do anything," he forced out. The shorter officer crouched, his smirk widening. "You did enough, fat boy. You should have known better." He punctuated the words with a hard punch to Raymond's gut. A deep pain shot through his stomach, forcing the breath from his lungs. He coughed, gasping for air, his body involuntarily curling inward. The taller officer laughed. "Not so tough now, are you?" Raymond clenched his fists. His vision swam for a moment, but his mind was clear. If he didn't do something, they weren't going to stop. He exhaled sharply and moved. Using his core strength, he twisted his body, jerking his trapped arm free just as the officer's balance wavered. The sudden motion sent the shorter officer stumbling to the side, just enough for Raymond to push himself halfway up. The taller officer grabbed for him, but this time Raymond didn't just block, he struck. A solid elbow to the ribs sent the officer reeling back with a grunt. Raymond surged upward, adrenaline pumping through his veins. The shorter officer rushed him, but Raymond stepped aside, using his opponent's momentum against him. The officer stumbled forward, and Raymond shoved him, sending him sprawling onto the ground. "Stay down!" Raymond growled. His voice was low, commanding. He was still trying to end this without going too far. But the officers weren't done. The taller one came at him again, swinging with full force. This time the punch connected, landing across Raymond's jaw. His head snapped to the side, the taste of blood filling his mouth. The shorter officer recovered, grabbing at Raymond's jacket, yanking hard. Raymond staggered, trying to keep his footing, but they were both on him now. The blows came fast, fists slamming into his ribs, into his arms as he tried to shield himself. They weren't just subduing him, they wanted to hurt him. Another punch caught him in the stomach. Then another. His legs buckled, and he dropped to one knee, gasping for air. The shorter officer grabbed his collar, yanking him up. "Not so big now, huh?" Raymond could barely hear him over the ringing in his ears. His body ached, his vision blurred at the edges. He had tried to hold back, tried to de-escalate, but they weren't stopping. They weren't going to stop. And he had nothing left to give. The baton came down on his shoulder first, a brutal strike that sent a jolt of pain down his arm. He barely had time to register it before another hit slammed into his ribs. He gasped, his body instinctively curling inward. "Still up?" the taller officer snarled. "Let's fix that." A sharp crack sounded as the baton struck the back of his knee, forcing him fully onto the ground. Raymond coughed, trying to push himself up, but the shorter officer kicked him in the ribs, rolling him onto his back. "You should have just gone home," the shorter officer muttered, before bringing the baton down again, this time against Raymond's side, hard and fast. Pain exploded through his ribs. His breath came in short, shallow gasps. He tried to curl away from the blows, but the taller officer pressed his boot against Raymond's chest, holding him down. "Stop resisting!" the officer barked, his voice mocking. "I'm not—" Raymond's words were cut off as the baton struck his arm again. His vision blurred at the edges, but he held on. Barely. Then came the weight, the combined force of both officers as they wrenched his arms behind his back. His wrists twisted unnaturally, the cold bite of metal snapping around them. The handcuffs dug in hard, too tight, cutting into his skin. Raymond lay there, chest heaving, pain pulsing through every inch of his body. The taller officer leaned down, his breath hot against Raymond's ear. "You should have just walked away." Raymond didn't respond. He didn't trust himself to. He kept his head turned to the side, his cheek pressed into the street. But he wasn't defeated. He wasn't broken. They didn't know it yet. But the whole world was about to see exactly what they had done. Raymond lay still on the pavement, his body aching from the repeated strikes. The cold metal of the cuffs bit into his wrists, his breathing ragged, as the weight of both officers finally lifted off him. His cheek pressed against the rough asphalt, the scent of blood and sweat thick in the air. He didn't fight as they hauled him up, his muscles screaming in protest as they yanked his arms higher than necessary. "On your feet," one of them muttered, pulling him up without care for his injuries. His ribs throbbed with every breath, his legs unsteady beneath him. The world tilted for a moment, but he kept himself upright. The officers led him toward the waiting squad car, the distant murmur of voices from a few onlookers carrying through the air. A couple of people stood on their porches, watching. Some shook their heads. No one intervened. The door opened, and they pushed him inside. The seat was hard and uncomfortable, the partition in front of him smeared with fingerprints from previous arrests. Raymond leaned his head back against the seat, exhaling slowly. His body ached, his mind still racing through the events that led to this moment. Outside, the officers spoke with another who had arrived late. He couldn't hear what they were saying, but he didn't need to. Their body language said enough. Casual, relaxed, it was routine to them. The car pulled away, the flashing lights casting a faint glow against the darkened streets. Raymond stared out the window, watching the quiet neighborhood fade behind them. The roads were empty, the houses still. He wondered how many of them had seen what happened, how many of them had looked away. The ride was silent for a while, the occasional crackle of the radio the only sound. Then one of the officers spoke without turning around. "Long night ahead." Raymond didn't respond. He had nothing to say to them. The station came into view, its harsh lights glaring against the night sky. As they pulled into the lot, he braced himself for what came next. The doors opened, and they pulled him out. The ground felt unsteady beneath his feet, or maybe it was just the exhaustion setting in. Inside, the station was cold and sterile, the scent of stale coffee and disinfectant lingering in the air. "Charges?" the officer at the desk asked without looking up. "Trespassing, resisting, assaulting an officer." Raymond's jaw tightened. "That's not true." The officer at the desk barely glanced at him. "Take it up later." They led him to a holding cell, the metal bars clanging shut behind him. The space was small, the bench against the wall the only place to sit. Raymond exhaled, lowering himself onto the bench with a slow breath. His ribs ached with every movement, the dull pulse of pain settling into his muscles. He rolled his shoulders, testing the strain. Across town, Lisa Tanner's phone buzzed against her desk. She barely had time to register the number before answering, her pulse quickening at the urgency in the voice on the other end. "They arrested him." Lisa sat up straight. "What?" "Raymond. They've got him in holding." She gripped the phone tighter, already reaching for her bag. "Tell me you got footage." "More than enough." Lisa was out the door before they finished speaking. Back in the cell, Raymond didn't know how long they planned to keep him here. He didn't know what they would try next. But he did know one thing. Lisa had the footage. And once it got out, this wasn't going to end the way they thought it would. The cold from the concrete bench seeped through Raymond's clothes as he sat with his back against the cell wall, his hands resting loosely in his lap. His fingers tingled from the tight cuffs they had only just removed, the skin around his wrists raw. The dull pulse of pain throbbed in his ribs, his body stiff from the beating. Every inhale sent a sharp sting through his side, and he knew at least one of the strikes had bruised something deep. He rolled his shoulders and let his head tilt back against the wall, staring up at the ceiling. The fluorescent lights hummed softly, a sound that blended with the occasional murmur of voices beyond the bars. The station wasn't loud, but it wasn't quiet either. Officers moved in and out of the main room, some laughing at private jokes, others speaking in low, professional tones. The normalcy of it all made Raymond's stomach twist. To them, this was nothing. Just another night, another arrest, another black man in a cell. He exhaled slowly, shaking his head. His whole body ached. But the worst of it wasn't physical. It was the anger creeping into his chest, the frustration sitting heavy in his gut. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. He knew getting stopped was a possibility. Hell, that was the whole point. But the way it escalated so fast, the way they went straight to violence, left his hands curling into fists. They were waiting for it, he muttered under his breath, his voice hoarse. They didn't need a reason. His fingers flexed, trying to shake the stiffness. He needed to calm down. He needed to focus. He knew better than to let his emotions take over, especially now. One of the officers walked past the holding cell, barely glancing at him before dropping a file onto the desk at the front. Raymond leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "How long you planning on keeping me in here?" he asked, his voice even but firm. The officer barely acknowledged him, flipping through the paperwork. "Until we process everything." Raymond huffed out a laugh, shaking his head. "Process what? You didn't find anything on me. I didn't break any laws. You just needed an excuse." The officer finally looked up, his expression unreadable. "You can talk all you want. Doesn't change the fact that you're sitting in that cell." Raymond clenched his jaw, inhaling slowly through his nose. "I want my phone call." "You'll get it." "When?" The officer smirked faintly. "Whenever we get to it." Raymond leaned back, pressing his lips together. He knew the game. They wanted him frustrated, wanted him to lash out so they could add more charges, extend the hold, keep him locked up just long enough for things to quiet down. But that wasn't going to happen. Lisa had the footage. The thought settled in his chest, steadying him. He had done his part. The rest was in motion now. Lisa sat at her desk, her fingers hovering over the keyboard, her pulse hammering in her ears. The room was dim, the only light coming from the glow of her laptop screen. The video was playing. She had seen a lot in her years as a journalist. Protests turned violent, leaked body cam footage, grainy cell phone videos of injustice unfolding in real time. But this was different. This was clear. This was undeniable. She leaned forward, her hands gripping the edges of her desk, as she watched the officers surround Raymond. Their postures tense before the first push, the sneers, the shoves, the way they circled him, then the first baton strike. She flinched when it hit, her fingers tightening. Even though she had known what happened, watching it unfold in crisp, high-quality footage made it feel heavier, more real. Raymond hadn't provoked them. He hadn't fought back. They had gone after him because they could. Lisa's stomach turned when the final strike sent him to the pavement. The moment the weight of both officers pressed down on him, the moment he stopped struggling, knowing there was no point, she felt something burn in her chest. Anger. Frustration, disbelief that this kept happening, over and over again. Her phone sat next to her, but she couldn't bring herself to reach for it. Not yet. She pressed play again, forcing herself to watch it from the beginning. She needed to be sure. The footage wasn't shaky. The sound was crisp. The words the officers used, the things they said, it was all there. No ambiguity. No gray areas. Lisa swallowed hard, exhaling through her nose. She reached for her phone, dialing a number with steady hands. It rang once, twice. Then a voice picked up. "This better be important," her editor said, his voice groggy with sleep. Lisa didn't hesitate. "I have something." Something big. A pause. Then his voice sharpened. How big? She glanced back at the screen, at the frozen image of Raymond on the ground. His face turned toward the camera, blood on his cheek. Big enough to set the city on fire. Raymond sat in the holding cell, his head tilted back against the cold concrete wall, his body aching from the beating. The bruises were setting in now, a deep throbbing ache in his ribs and arms that made even breathing a chore. He had tried to adjust his position on the hard bench, but there was no comfort here. The fluorescent lights above buzzed faintly, casting a sterile glow over the room. Officers walked past the bars without looking at him, their conversations low and filled with laughter, as if he wasn't even there. The wait was deliberate. He knew it. They were making him sit, making him stew in it, letting the weight of what they had done settle in his bones. They wanted him frustrated. They wanted him angry. But he wasn't going to give them the satisfaction. The only thing keeping him steady was the knowledge that Lisa had the footage. The whole thing. He exhaled sharply, rubbing his wrists where the cuffs had been too tight. He had been in worse situations before. He had survived worse. But this wasn't just about him. This was bigger. And outside, the city was about to find out just how big. Lisa sat in her car, her laptop balanced on the center console, the video queued up on the screen. The unedited footage played from the moment Raymond entered the neighborhood. The entire interaction with the officers captured in crystal clarity. The taunts, the shoves, the first baton strike. There was no room for misinterpretation. She had called her editor, given him the rundown, but she knew this needed to move fast. The longer they waited, the easier it would be for the police to control the narrative. She didn't hesitate. She hit upload. Within minutes, it was out. She pushed open the door, stepping into the cool night air. Her phone buzzed almost instantly. Her editor, reporters she hadn't spoken to in months, community activists already demanding statements. She ignored the calls. The footage would speak for itself. And it did. Across the city, phones vibrated, notifications lit up screens, and people paused in their tracks as the video began spreading like wildfire. Social media exploded with outrage. The footage reposted across every platform, dissected frame by frame. The hashtag, Justice for Raymond, started trending within the hour. In Raymond's neighborhood, the reaction was immediate. Inside the corner store, a small crowd had gathered, the video playing on a customer's phone, heads clustered around the screen. The shop owner, Mr. Daniels, shook his head, his jaw tight as he watched Raymond take the first hit. "That man served this country," he muttered, "and look at how they treat him." A younger man beside him, maybe in his early 20s, scoffed. "Man, this is what happens when you go looking for trouble. He should have never been over there." An older woman standing behind them crossed her arms. "He wasn't looking for trouble. He was trying to prove a point." "And what did it prove?" the younger man shot back. "That they're gonna do what they always do, that they can beat us down, lock us up, and nothing changes. It proves," Mr. Daniels said, his voice low and firm, "that now the whole damn world can see it." Elsewhere, outside a local diner, two men leaned against the wall, one scrolling through his phone while the other paced. "They didn't even hesitate," the first man said, shaking his head. "They were waiting for an excuse." The second man exhaled, rubbing a hand down his face. "Yeah, and now we gotta figure out what we're gonna do about it. This is bigger than just one arrest," the first man muttered. "This is about all of us." The church doors down the street had been left open, the video playing on a projector inside. A group of community members sat in silence, watching Raymond's last words before the first baton came down. Reverend Harris, a man in his 60s with graying hair and sharp eyes, turned to the crowd. "We cannot let this be just another story," he said, his voice steady. "We cannot let this be forgotten." Some nodded, others murmured their agreement. Outside, a mother sat in her parked car, her hands gripping the steering wheel as the video looped on her phone screen. Her teenage son sat beside her, watching in silence. "This is why I tell you to be careful," she said, finally. The boy swallowed hard but didn't look away. Inside the police station, the shift in atmosphere was palpable. Officers who had been laughing minutes ago now whispered among themselves, checking their phones, glancing toward the holding cells. The station chief stormed out of his office, a phone pressed to his ear, his voice sharp. "How the hell did this get out so fast?" The officer at the desk shifted uncomfortably. "I don't know, sir, but it's everywhere," the chief swore under his breath. "Where's Carter?" "Still in holding." "Get him processed. Now!" Raymond sat up straighter when he saw the movement outside his cell. The energy in the station had changed. Something had shifted. The officer who had ignored him earlier now looked uneasy as he approached the bars. "Looks like you're getting your phone call." Raymond didn't move right away. He let the moment sit, watching the officer's expression shift. Then, slowly, he stood. Lisa had done her job. Now it was time for the rest of the world to do theirs. Raymond sat at the metal table in the dimly lit processing room, a landline phone pressed against his ear. His ribs ached every time he inhaled, and his knuckles were still stiff from being cuffed too tightly. The air smelled like coffee and ink, the usual stench of a station where too many people had been processed before him. Lisa's voice came through the line, steady but urgent. "They just let you make this call?" she asked. Raymond exhaled. "Only because they don't have a choice anymore. They know what's happening," Lisa said. "The video's everywhere and the pressure is mounting, but they're already trying to spin it." Raymond rubbed his temple, wincing at the lingering pain from the officer's baton. "Let me guess. Big black guy attacks officers. They had to defend themselves." "Exactly," Lisa confirmed. "But it's not holding. Too many people saw what really happened." She hesitated. "And there's more. Someone else was recording." Raymond sat up straighter. "Who?" "A kid. High schooler. He was down the street when it happened. Caught the whole thing from another angle. His footage is even worse for them. It shows the first officer checking if his body cam was off before they started hitting you." Raymond clenched his jaw. "That's a game changer." "It is," Lisa agreed, but there was hesitation in her voice. "What's the problem?" Raymond asked. "He's scared," Lisa admitted. "Won't give me his name. Says he doesn't want to get involved, doesn't trust the police to leave him alone if they find out he filmed it." Raymond leaned back in his chair, the chain on his cuffs rattling slightly. He understood the fear. A kid with footage like that? He had every reason to be afraid of the retaliation. "We need to protect him," Raymond said. "He can't do this alone. I told him we can blur his face, keep his identity out of it. But he's still hesitant," Lisa said.